And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day, another great week, in fact, in this greatest nation on God's green earth. Why is it a great week? It is an eventful week. Tomorrow is the State of the Union address. President Trump over the weekend has been expressing his temper tantrum over a Supreme Court decision that could be disastrous for his administration. But will he talk about it tomorrow night to a joint session of Congress and to the world? What do you think the chances are? I'd say bordering on 100%. The Dow is gyrating wildly. It's up, it's down, it's mostly down today. Democrats are protesting. The Epstein fallout worldwide is intensifying with another very prominent arrest in Great Britain after the arrest of Prince Andrew. There was an intruder who was shot, attempting apparently to get onto the grounds of Mar-a-Lago. He was shot and killed, 20-year-old guy, and somebody who has an interesting aspect in his background. The government shutdown, tariff refund, and war with Iran, all kinds of information about how, as they say in a headline in the New York Times, Iran makes preparations for surviving a war with the U.S. Now, why are they concerned about surviving a war with the U.S.? Because obviously they are extremely inferior to the United States in terms of military strength. However, the survival of Iran and the survival of this government in some kind of configuration would be a tremendous defeat still for the United States. So what is coming up? Meanwhile, breaking today from Fox Business, just hours ago, as gold prices keep rising, American economist Peter Schiff said that investors should view the rally as more than a hedge, calling it a warning, the rising gold prices, that inflation is speeding up, the U.S. dollar is losing global trust, and major economic reckoning may be near. Do you think that will be acknowledged by President Trump in the State of the Union? Gold and silver are warning about a bigger crisis, so said Peter Schiff, that's going to hit later this year or maybe next year. We are headed for a U.S. dollar crisis and a sovereign debt crisis, Schiff said yesterday on the Clayman Countdown. Quote, central banks are buying gold to back up their currencies. They're getting rid of dollars. They're getting rid of treasuries, he continued. We are headed for an economic crisis again that will make the 2008 financial crisis look like a Sunday school picnic. I mean, Sunday school picnic, I guess, can be kind of exciting, but they're mostly innocent. The Independent Women's Forum senior policy advocate Carrie Sheffield told Fox News Digital last Wednesday that some commentators like to play for TV time with loud forecasts that often don't match reality. She didn't think that things were quite as dire as Peter Schiff maintained. Meanwhile, from CNBC, the Dow down hundreds as the sell-off ramps up following Trump's global tariff hike. Now, you would think that with the Supreme Court decision, and it wasn't a close decision, it was a 6-3 decision, where 2 out of the 3 Trump appointees to the Supreme Court voted against Trump. And the president was angry about that, extremely angry about that. We will get to that. There is also more on the Epstein fallout. The Justice Department's release of millions of files relating to its investigation into the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has shaken the upper echelons of power across the globe, resulting in high-profile firings and resignations in the U.S. and abroad, and a number of active criminal investigations overseas. From CNN this morning, concerning the Epstein situation, the former UK ambassador to the U.S. and a top aide and associate of the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, U.S. former ambassador to the U.S. from Great Britain, from the United Kingdom, is named Peter Mandelson. And he was arrested today on suspicion of misconduct in public office, that according to PA Media. Mandelson is a veteran Labour Party politician who has been accused of passing information to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein when he was business secretary with two of his properties searched by police. He was arrested on the same charges that put the former Prince Andrew behind bars. Also breaking from CNN, Special Counsel Jack Smith, remember him? He was appointed to investigate Trump's attempts to overturn the election results and his mishandling of documents, remember, in his bathroom and elsewhere in Mar-a-Lago. Special Counsel Jack Smith's final report on Donald Trump's alleged mishandling of classified records and obstruction of justice at Mar-a-Lago after his first term will not be released. That is the decision of Trump's favorite judge. His favorite judge is named Eileen Cannon. Remember her? She is a district judge down in Florida, and she tends to be very favorable to Trump, whatever the issue. The decision by U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon, who threw out the case Smith brought against the president before he was reelected, is a major win in Trump's efforts to keep the special counsel's findings forever hidden from public view. U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon was appointed by, well, guess who? Oh, Donald Trump. And will he say something about judicial appointments after his tariff takedown? The Dispatch writes in a 6-3 decision on Friday, the Supreme Court ruled that President Donald Trump could not impose tariffs under the 1977 International Emergency Powers Act, the IEEPA, striking down most of the administration's current tariff duties. And they are tax duties. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the 21-page majority opinion, joined by the three liberal justices and by Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch. Brett Kavanaugh, the third of the Trump judges, wrote a dissent. He was joined by two Bush judges, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, them appointed by different Presidents Bush, arguing that the IEPA text clearly delegated tariff power to the executive and noted that courts have avoided invoking the major questions doctrine in cases involving foreign affairs. Question now, could the $175 billion that is now viewed as invalid, could that be refunded? And who gets those refunds? We will get to that and more coming up with questions about a government tariff refund, bait and switch. We'll be right back on the MedBed Show. President Trump called the Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling against his right unilaterally to impose tariffs deeply disappointing. and said that the justices who voted in the majority, that's 6 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices, that those 6 justices were a disgrace to our nation. There's also a new T-shirt that is being sold by the Trump administration, by the MAGA movement. It shows a scowling picture of Trump with the headline, "I can destroy the country." No, that's a joke, actually. But the president did say it. And it's totally bizarre. His reaction, his verbal reaction to the Supreme Court ruling against him is unhinged. It basically, it sounded like this, and this is not edited to sound strange. It is strange, and it's deeply threatening and completely inappropriate for the President of the United States. Here is President Trump, clip 7.
I understand the court. I understand how they're very easily swayed. I want to be a good boy. But other alternatives will now be used to replace the ones that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives. I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade. I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country destroying embargo. I can embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1.
Basically, what is he saying? It's unclear. When he says, "I can destroy the country," what he's talking about is other countries. And of course he can. The United States is the most powerful country in the world. But the president does not have sole power in the United States. And the idea that he is saying, "I can destroy the trade, I can destroy the country," is shocking and completely unreal. And this is no one is yet selling T-shirts with that slogan, "I can destroy the country." But I think it's fairly inescapable that somebody is going to try to have some merch successes based upon that aspect of things. The president's statement over at Truth Social, he begins by saying the Supreme Court, but he writes Supreme Court in lowercase letters, no capitals. He says the Supreme Court will be using lowercase letters for a while, based on a complete lack of respect of the United States, accidentally and unwittingly gave me, as President of the United States, far more powers and strength than I had prior to their ridiculous, dumb, and very internationally divisive ruling. For one thing, I can use licenses, and licenses are capitalized, to do absolutely terrible things to foreign countries, especially those countries that have been ripping us off for many decades, but incomprehensibly, according to the ruling, can't change them, can't charge them a license fee. But all licenses charge fees. Why can't the United States do so? You do a license to get a fee. The opinion doesn't explain that, but I know the answer. The court has also approved all other tariffs, of which there are many, and they can be used, and they're, by the way, spelled wrong. They're THEIR, of which there are many, and they can all be used in a much more powerful and obnoxious way with legal certainty than the tariffs as initially used. Our incompetent Supreme Court, lowercase, did a great job for the wrong people, and for that they should be ashamed of themselves, but not the great three. The great three are Justices Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. The next thing you know, they will rule in favor of China and others who are making an absolute fortune on birthright citizenship by saying that the 14th Amendment was not written to take care of the quote, babies of slaves, which it was proven by the exact timing of its construction, filing, and ratification, which perfectly coincided with the end of the Civil War. In other words, what he is trying to say is that the way we've understood the 14th Amendment since the end of the Civil War is wrong. That people who passed that amendment, people who have certified that amendment on the Supreme Court, they're all wrong. That he's right, getting rid of the idea that anybody born in the United States is automatically a U.S. citizen. How much better can you do than that? But this Supreme Court, he says, will find a way to come to the wrong conclusion, one that, again, will make China and various other nations happy and rich. Let our Supreme Court keep making decisions that are so bad and deleterious to the future of our nation. I have a job to do. And then this is all in capitals. Make America great again. Signed, President Donald J. Trump. A New York Times is writing about the Supreme Court decision under the headline, "In Gorsuch's homage to legislative power, a subtle reproach of a neutered Congress." In his concurrence to the ruling invalidating President Trump's tariffs, Justice Neil M. Gorsuch made a forceful case for the sanctity of the legislative process and an implicit critique of its current dysfunction. Or were they talking about here? Yes, legislating can be hard and take time, wrote Justice Gorsuch. A Trump appointee who is part of the court's conservative majority. And yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises, but the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design by the founders. Through that process, the nation can tap the combined wisdom of the people's elected representatives, not just that of one faction or one man. It was a description of governing completely at odds with what is currently underway across the street from the Supreme Court at the Capitol, where Republicans controlling the House and the Senate have ceded their power to one man, Mr. Trump, on a variety of issues. In essence, they are acting as if they have no wisdom to tap or no business doing so. And what about Andy McCarthy and his position on this situation? We'll get to that and more coming up on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, the Wall Street Journal, America's most influential and leading conservative outlet for the media, the Wall Street Journal had an editorial under the headline, "The Real Tariff Liberation Day." Remember, a little less than a year ago, the president proclaimed Tariff Liberation Day, meaning that he was going to impose tariffs on everyone, everywhere. The Wall Street Journal now writes, "The real Tariff Liberation Day arrives at the Supreme Court when the justices strike down President Trump's imposition of border taxes without congressional approval." And Andy McCarthy, the outstanding attorney, frequent guest on this show, and great prosecutor with all kinds of experience as a top aide, U.S. attorney in the Justice Department. He is also a Fox News contributor, conservative legal scholar, and one of the primary voices at National Review. According to Mediaite, he ripped President Donald Trump a new one over the tantrum the president has thrown in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision to strike down the tariffs he's imposed illegally under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Andy McCarthy writes, "President Trump's attacks on the Supreme Court are an unmitigated disgrace. That's how he began his column for National Review. He went on, the court tried to act in good faith, and for what it's worth, successfully, in my view, to uphold the law. By now, the president has to know that the fallout of his ravings will be harassment of the justices by elements of his base that are as deranged as he is the plan to ignite a riot on the Supreme Court steps this time, while he can still pardon the rabble-rousers as he did the Capitol rioters? Moreover, what value is there in an oath to execute the laws faithfully from a man who either has no regard for the law or delusionally sees the law as what he personally wants, with what he doesn't want seen not merely as illegal, but as treasonous? He asked provocatively before accusing congressional Republicans of being derelict in their duty to uphold the rule of law. Andy McCarthy, went on to submit that the new tariffs Trump has sought to impose under Section 122 of the Trade Act are even more clearly illegal than Trump's IEEPA tariffs, arguing that because President Trump has no unilateral authority to order tariffs, he must meet the preconditions of Section 122 to justify levying them. He cannot, not even close. And there is no way other than changing the law, which is not going to happen, that Congress can now overturn what the Supreme Court has decided. The Supreme Court gets the decision here. And when you have lost Andy McCarthy, and the fact that he points out that President Trump's response is a disgrace here, what is he going to do, President Trump, at the State of the Union tomorrow? And the day after tomorrow, after the State of the Union, Andy McCarthy is going to be joining us here on the show in reaction. As a Friday press conference following the court's issuance of its decision, the president suggested that it had been corrupted by foreign influence on our Supreme Court and unleashed on the 3 Republican-appointed justices who voted to strike down his tariffs, 3 of them. John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch. You can't knock their loyalty, says McCarthy, the justices appointed by Democrats. One thing you can do with some of our people, others think they are being politically correct. This is what the president said, which has happened before far too often with certain members of this court. And it happens so often with this court, what a shame, having to deal with voting in particular when, in fact, they are just being fools and lapdogs and rhinos for the rhinos and for the radical left Democrats. And not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They are very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution, said Trump. Yes, he nominated 2 people, in particular Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch, who was his first nominee to the Supreme Court. And in the past, he's praised them and praised his own nominees. Now he says he regrets them because he thinks they're undergoing foreign influence. The entire thing is way, way out of control. And meanwhile, for people who are expecting a refund, the Wall Street Journal has included an editorial that explains why it's not so easy. The refund bait and switch, a government tariff refund bait and switch, unless you're the importer of record, and maybe even then you won't get back a dime of the tariffs you've already paid. Hoping for a tariff refund, don't hold your breath. They write, winning at the Supreme Court was the easy part. To understand what comes next, Consider how the government survived the legal skirmishes that led to its loss last week. Then they write that Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was the one Trump appointee who voted with Trump, in dissent, flagged what he called the likely mess of a refund process. He noted that returning billions raises serious Treasury concerns and that the majority offered no roadmap for how it should work. The practical difficulty is real, but it didn't come from nowhere. Courts allowed collections to continue precisely because the government called refunds simple, assured, and beyond dispute. Invoking that same complexity to resist the refunds would be an extraordinary reversal. So more confusion, and will President Trump get behind the idea of tariff refunds in his big speech tomorrow night? It's all extremely unlikely. We will get to what the president had to say and more about what is likely to dominate some of the talk at the State of the Union address. And what is likely to dominate that talk is the prospect of war with Iran. Lawmakers are coming back to Washington, D.C. ahead of President Trump's State of the Union tomorrow with no signs of a deal immediately in reach to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. And with that going on, that will also be a subject. Today marks the 10th day that the Department of Homeland Security has been without funding after the two parties were unable to reach an agreement amid a major debate over the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policy. A new poll also reveals, well, what is the country feeling about all of this and about the prospects of war? And what about the Trump ravings after the ruling? That's a good phrase, isn't it? Could make a headline, ravings after the ruling. We'll get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, as the whole world waits for one of the biggest speeches of the Trump presidency, speech on the eve of war with Iran, and there is a great abundance of commentary about how this war would not be a quickie. It would not be like the previous attack on Iran, which was successful by the United States and by Israel. This would be a much longer term commitment and a much more costly commitment if it goes forward. We will have word on that tomorrow night, and with a deal still possible, some sources are saying. We will get to that, but meanwhile, there was an episode at Mar-a-Lago under the headline from the Associated Press, armed man shot, killed at Mar-a-Lago's perimeter. And you would naturally think that that armed man was a terrorist, was somebody who hated America, who hated Donald Trump in particular, because he was attacking not the White House, but Mar-a-Lago. And by the way, Trump wasn't there. Trump was back in Washington getting ready for the State of the Union. And if this dead would-be terrorist had any brains at all, he would realize he has a State of the Union tomorrow night. He's going to be in Washington, not in Mar-a-Lago. But he sacrificed his life for what cause, we don't know yet. The Associated Press reports an armed man drove into the secure perimeter of Mar-a-Lago, President Donald Trump's resort in Palm Beach, Florida, before being shot and killed at 1 a.m. on Sunday morning. That's yesterday. And that's according to a spokesperson for the U.S. Secret Service. Trump was not there, but was at the White House in Washington, preparing for the State of the Union. The man, who was in his early 20s and from North Carolina, had a gas can and a shotgun. according to Anthony Guglielmi, a spokesman for the security at Mar-a-Lago. He had been reported missing by his family a few days ago, and investigators thought he headed south, and picked up the shotgun along the way. Guglielmi said that a box for the weapon was discovered in the man's vehicle after the incident, which took place around 1:30 a.m. The man killed was identified by investigators as a 21-year-old. Isn't that a shame, regardless of who it is? 21 years old, and you die with a gas can and a shotgun? His name was Austin Tucker Martin, according to a person familiar with the matter. The man entered the north gate of the property as another vehicle was exiting and was confronted by two Secret Service agents and a Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputy, according to a Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw. He was ordered to drop those two pieces of equipment, that's a gas can and a shotgun, that he had with him, at which time he put down the gas can and raised the shotgun to a shooting position. Bradshaw saw that the brief news conference, and at that conference he pointed out that the two agents and the deputy then fired their weapons to neutralize the threat. The FBI asked residents who live near Mar-a-Lago to check any security cameras they may have for footage that could help investigators. At a post on X, FBI Director Kash Patel, who was actually over at the Winter Olympics enjoying himself, which he said he went to on FBI business, Kash Patel said the Bureau would be dedicating all necessary resources to the investigation. Investigators were working to complete a psychological profile, and a motive is still under investigation. Asked whether the man was known to law enforcement, Bradshaw said not right now. However, this is the comments from his family and people who knew him. On Sunday afternoon, vehicles blocked the entrance to a property listed in public records as an address for Martin at the end of a private road in Cameron, North Carolina. And Braden Field, Martin's cousin, reacted with disbelief. He described Martin naturally as quiet, afraid of guns, and from a family of avid Trump supporters. He's a good kid, Fields 19 said. He said he grew up together with the would-be killer, now dead. I wouldn't believe he would do something like that. It's mind-blowing. It's also incredibly stupid. He said Martin worked at a local golf course and would send money from each paycheck to charity. He wouldn't even hurt an ant. He doesn't even know how to use a gun, Field said, and yet he raised his shotgun against law enforcement. His cousin didn't discuss politics, he said, but we are a big Trump family of supporters. All of us, everybody, Field said. But his cousin was real quiet, never really talked about anything. The incursion at Mar-a-Lago took place a few miles from Trump's West Palm Beach club, where a man tried to assassinate him while he played golf during the 2024 campaign. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said in a post on X that the United States Secret Service acted quickly and decisively to neutralize a crazy person armed with a gun and a gas canister who intruded on President Trump's home. Leavitt used her post to blame Democrats and lawmakers in Congress for the partial government shutdown affecting the Homeland Security Department, as if that had anything to do with this episode at all, which it didn't, which began February 14th, Valentine's Day, after Democrats demanded changes to the president's deportation campaign. But this is no deportation campaign. This is a 20-year-old kid from a very pro-Trump family who apparently said nothing that would help to explain what his motives were. I'm sure we'll hear more about that as time goes on. Meanwhile, CNN reports that Mexico's most wanted cartel boss and head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Nemesio El Mencho Aseguera Cervantes, was killed Sunday in a Mexican military operation in the town of Talaapla. Meanwhile, the armed man who was shot dead at Mar-a-Lago, their new revelations show, like much of the rest of the country, he was fixated on Epstein files. Is that why he showed up with a shotgun and a gas canister at Mar-a-Lago? All very confusing. Concerning the more serious matter, coming up next hour, we're going to talk about the prospect of war with Iran. The United States has ordered non-essential diplomats and their family members at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut to leave Lebanon, a State Department official said today, as tensions over Iran rise with the threat of a potentially imminent military strike. Remember, President Trump gave a 10-day deadline? Well, that's clicking down to, well, it would not be D-Day, it would be I-Day, Iran Day. And the deal is still possible, but the Atlantic Council is saying before striking Iran, Trump should answer these 6 questions. Plus, the Bret Stephens makes the case for striking Iran without hesitation, but without a congressional support or approval, which could well be available or not. We will get to that and to that controversy and to the new mood of the country awaiting the annual report from the President of the United States in the State of the Union address, which will be joining us, that reality, in a little more than 24 hours. That coming up for this greatest nation on God's green earth.